Sam, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. I feel this one has been in the making or in the ether for some time, so I'm very grateful to have the chance to sit down with you today.
Yeah, likewise. I think, it's been on our radar for a while, hasn't it? So it's good to be here.
So we jump straight in with, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Well, when you asked that a second ago before we started, I was like, oh shit, I don't have a question. And then one instantly came up, which probably will change all the time. But what feels present now is what I'm really exploring now is what does it mean to be more me in the world? And what does like a really true expression of me or Sam show up? How does he show up? What does he spend his time doing? What does he care about? And I feel like the last period of my life has really been a shedding of particular ways of being, ways of showing up in the world. And each shed probably exposes myself a little bit more. And that's equally exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Can you give me a sense, I guess, of just how that question has evolved for you to kind of become more front of mind at the moment?
Yeah, so I actually had a therapy session yesterday morning where we explored how everything I've done in my life, whether it's professional sport, building a coffee business, coaching people, has always been, it's been often for others whilst also being for me, but it's been for me in a way of trying to fix something I perceive to be lacking or broken in me. So the for me bit was never an expression of who I was. It was like, I need to do this thing to prove something, or I need to make this happen because then that'll mean this about me. So I don't know how much of my life I've actually spent living like as me. I think this has been very much, I've been doing it to get somewhere or to make something happen.
That's a lovely sentiment, isn't it? I think for anyone who's listening to even sit with, like, to be, you know, to be kind of doing something but not as me, and how, I don't know, it seems quite subtle but quite significant.
Yeah, and it's funny because of course I was me doing these things, but it was it was a version of me, or a very carefully curated persona. I can really visualize like chapters in my life, and I can just really sense into the person I was during those chapters, and how I felt and how I carried myself, and how even how I spoke would be different. And quite often my views would change depending on who I was spending time with. I really learnt to be a chameleon and to change myself to be the person I thought the person I was with wanted me to be. And it worked to an extent in that I created external success that people would say like, that's a life that works, but it didn't feel great and it was exhausting, and eventually was no longer sustainable. And that, I guess, has been the real transition in the last however many years.
Just interested from your perspective, because I think there's moments in my own life where I became more acutely aware that that was occurring. Um, I think there's even moments where I generally quite like speaking, um, and talking with people, and moments where my voice would have broke, even while presenting things or talking about things maybe I didn't quite believe in, and that was too far a bridge. Can you give me a kind of an idea of moments in whatever chapter it is that became more clear to you that this was occurring?
Mm. So I think the first one that comes to mind is I was at a state school, and then in halfway through year 10, when I would have been 14, I think, I got a scholarship to go to a private school to play rugby. and I went from the state school environment in the village to the private school environment in the village. The schools were probably about half a mile apart, but they were very different, and they were very different people. And I went from being like a normal kid to being the kid that came from state school but was really good at rugby. So there was like this, I was like holding both these things. There was lots of, I guess, judgment or like teasing around being the kid that came from the state school, but then there was also like this reverence of like, but he's really good at rugby and he's going to win us lots of games next year. So it was this very strange like thing to hold as a teenager. And I've very quickly like realized that my voice became posher. I like started dressing differently, and I looked around. I was like, how do I fit into this world? And I just did the things that on the surface I thought would work. And then I came out of that school into rugby environment and went to play for Harlequins at 18. And my voice changed back to what it normally was. I started dressing like the guys at the rugby club. I started getting into the things that they were into, because I don't think I ever believed deep down I deserved to be in any of these environments. And so I was packing on armor or disguises or costumes that I guess I hoped deep down would shield the not enoughness or hide it or disguise it.
The not enoughness I come into contact with a lot, I think, during these interviews when people are reflecting at different moments of their lives. Just from your perspective, how do you how can you kind of give us a feel for how you might have experienced that?
Well, I think similarly, I come across not enoughness in my work now all the time. I think it's everywhere in our society and
Absolutely,
in our culture. Yeah. And my experience of it is it's a really amazing fuel to make things happen. Like it's an amazing driver, and I would put down most of my success to the fact that I believed I wasn't good enough, because it really drove me to make things happen and push myself and be willing to make myself feel uncomfortable. But it comes at a cost. It's a finite fuel. There's a ceiling of, I believe anyway, in my experience, there's a ceiling of how far someone can take themselves using not enoughness as the driver. And I've experienced that. I see it a lot, where all of a sudden the wheels come off because the almost like the body can't take it anymore. It's the image that comes now is like going down a hill in a kind of a go-kart or something that you've made, and that there's a certain point where the wheels start coming off.
That's a great image. It does make me, I don't know, I've been reflecting a lot recently. Someone recently said to me in a conversation how she doesn't think that a lot of the things we do are species appropriate, like the ways in which we show up with each other, engage with each other, even the values that our cultures or some cities may hold. And that idea of the kind of the unsustainable nature of that, coupled with this go-kart going downhill, like it is quite astonishing what we do to ourselves in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, species appropriate. Well, yeah, we would so often we would never treat someone else how we treat ourselves. And what a fascinating part of being human is noticing one day that, oh wow, I've been treating myself really poorly. And what a gift that moment is, because all of a sudden, once you see it, you're able to do something about it. But I think for so much of my life, I was totally oblivious to the fact that there was another way. Thought it was just this was who I am. This is the voice in my head I believed was me. I believed every word it said. And it creates a certain experience of life, and it wasn't one that I was willing to continue living with, because it wasn't a lot of fun at times.
Yeah, you're not selling it in a very enticing way. Just out of interest for you, Sam, when did you when did you start to question that, or what were the ways into perhaps acknowledging that and noticing that?
Yeah, so I retired from pro rugby at 26 through injury, and that was never part of kind of my. I had a very clear plan of where my life was headed, and that wasn't part of it. And I threw myself into building a coffee business, and with hindsight, I think so much of my self worth was wrapped up in my identity as an athlete, and so the fact that I was about to lose that was utterly terrifying because it was really like, who am I going to be without that thing that I do? So I with hindsight, I can see that I thought, oh, well, being a founder, that's cool and people value that. So I'll become one of those, and kind of took up one sort of high identity or what I perceived high value identity for another, and carried on playing the same game, but just in a different arena. And I wasn't able to cope emotionally with the loss of rugby. And I was 2 years into building my business. It was, well, again, on the surface, it was going really well, but I was totally lost, and I was using drugs and alcohol and work to just numb myself from myself. And I've really, really fortunately, one of my regulars is a coach and a therapist, and he came in all the time and we got to know each other. And one day he just put his arm on my shoulder and said, would you like to go for a coffee? Maybe not here. And I tried to resist, and I knew what he was getting at, and I wasn't at that moment able to receive the help. I think again that the not enoughness often for me would manifest in pushing people away and not allowing people in to support me, and believing I had to do it all myself. But he was consistent, and he was there for me, and eventually we worked together, and that was just one of those moments where my whole life transformed. Like, I don't even know if like 1,000 degrees in a couple of weeks. And I haven't I haven't looked back since that moment. As soon as I accepted the help, everything changed.
Can you talk to me about that idea or notion that you knew what he was getting at, even if it wasn't totally explicit,
Mm.
and the momentary resisting of it before you went on to engage with it?
Mm. Well, what comes is that I think we all have it where parents or partners or friends are saying these things to us for sometimes for years or decades, and
Yeah, yeah,
we know they're true.
yeah,
But
yeah,
deep down we know they're true. But the kind of the sort of more, I guess, resistant parts of us are just shut it down. And I think it was the first time that someone from outside of my close circle had kind of pointed at something, and so it landed differently. Because I think for me, and I think a lot of people have probably experienced this, of when it comes from loved ones and family, that we can easily wrap it up in like, oh, well, they've got an ulterior motive here, and it's easy to deflect. But when it comes from someone who has no stake in our life, it's kind of harder to ignore. Um, and I guess by that point, I am a big reader. So I was initially very into entrepreneurial books and business books, but I had started to dip my toe into like, I don't feel good. Like, what do I do? And I started to read some books, and I think the door was like being oiled, ready to be opened, and he was the person who came and knocked.
It sounds it sounds lovely though, like irrespective of it being a professional engagement. Then, if you know what I mean, but just the repeated interest. Do you know what I mean? Like just someone repeatedly, um, almost offering a hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that repetition was what allowed or helped me allow myself to receive the help. I think probably after, now you're saying that after a couple of conversations and a realization that he's not going anywhere, he means this, that I was able to kind of move through all the stories I had around, well, he doesn't mean it, he's just saying it. And yeah, I think super important for us to have people like that in our lives who just stand really steady for us and aren't shaken by all the things we think are like not allowed to see the light of day and no one else could ever know about us. Like, to have someone in your life that can hold that with you is a magical experience.
It is kind of crazy but true. Just the sentiment that if it were to come from somebody that we knew or a family member, even that it could be so wrapped up in the history of an experience, the sometimes point scoring that might occur. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so interesting that these really close, intimate relationships can also be cloaked in such kind of intricate webs as well. You know?
Mm, yeah, yeah, and I guess my experience has been that once I let someone from the outside in, I was then able to let the people who were close in, and
Yeah.
I don't understand why that's the case, or it just was for me. And yeah, it's well, we have a habit of making our lives really complicated. We're very good at that, I think.
When you mentioned the emotional loss of rugby, I was just intrigued as to how that manifested for you in your life.
I think it was almost a death of self to some respect, and there was a grieving process that happened without me realizing that that was what was happening. And I remember driving down from Worcester to London to see the surgeon, and it was in that with the physio at the club, and in that meeting was the meeting we decided that it was time to call it. And essentially I could get back to 90% of my top speed, and I played on the wing, which requires 100% of my speed. So we made that call, and then I just walked out of that room and locked myself in the disabled toilet, and I just collapsed in a heap on the floor, and I cried, I don't know, for 20 minutes. And I was a 26-year-old guy who hadn't cried for probably over a decade, and I didn't know what was happening. And then I came out of that room and tried to pretend like everything was fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that probably summarizes where I was at in that time of all of these things were happening, and I didn't know what was happening or how to be with it or how to talk about it or how to share it. I had no concept that anyone else in the world had ever felt like that.
Isn't that isn't that probably the greatest lie that we tell ourselves? Like, and I know, let's say, professional athlete it's not an everyday professional or something like that, but whatever the experience is or setting, that we can really feel that we're the only ones that are experiencing this set of circumstances now, which is really wild, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's when you look at it zoomed out, it's laughable, because it's like, you're not. Well, I'm not special. I'm not the only person who has access to deep sadness. But I guess at times in our life we believe we're the center of the universe and everything revolves around us, and we're the only one in this. And I guess it's that disconnect that we go through from others and from our, I guess, our true self, or the kind of the deeper parts of us that know and believe and have faith.
When you mentioned that, this went 1,000 degrees almost in a matter of weeks, what kind of landed most kind of quickly and impactfully for you in terms of perhaps revealing more more of the truth of self that you were that you mentioned even in the opening question?
The biggest thing that I took at the beginning was that I wasn't broken, and that I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't abnormal, and something Hugh said to me. I think I remember came into a session maybe 6 weeks in and saying, like, I can't believe how much has changed and how different I feel and how quickly it's happened. And something he said that has always stuck with me is that just because we have complicated locks doesn't mean we need complicated keys. And that just summarized my experience at the beginning of, just because you felt like this for 10 years or however long doesn't mean it's going to take 10 years to undo it. And for me, there's so much power in realizing that the stories that we're telling ourselves aren't the truth. They're just a story, and that there are multiple other options that we could create and we could share and we could speak and we could see.
Can you give me an example of a story that you were almost surprised at how quickly it did fall away?
I can't think of one from that period, but the one that comes to mind, I was working with a coach last year called Townsend, and we were doing some work around my parents, and I told this story that when I came off a rugby field, when I started playing rugby when I was 13, and when I would come off the rugby field on a Sunday, it would be the point of my week where my parents looked the happiest. And the rest of Sundays tended to be really lovely as a family and like really light and fun. And I internalized that as a 13-year-old, is that when I'm good at sport or good at something that makes my parents happy. And that was a belief I carried for such a long time, and for, well, probably nearly 20 years. And it was interesting that when I was coming out of rugby, I was really scared to tell them because of all the sacrifices they'd made for me to help me go to that school and to drive me to all around the country. They flew all around the world to watch me play. There was like, whilst I knew that they would, I knew they loved me and I knew that they would be fine, there was also a real fear of like, well, but they've invested so much and this makes them happy. And Townsend invited me to go and speak to my parents about that. And I went to speak to them about it. And I told them, and my mum was like, oh my goodness, Sam, like the reason that we were so happy on a Sunday as you walked off the pitch, because it was the first point in the week that you looked the happiest. And it was just this incredible moment for me to see that how like wildly wrong we can interpret a look or a word or anything. And actually they were happy because I was happy. And that had always been the case. And yet I'd carried a very different story for a long time.
I don't know. There's certain things that I hear sometimes that just, I don't know, just seem to touch the core of my humanity. Do you know, like and it's probably like I can think of many times where I've assumed something, where it was much more simple and, um, much more loving in a different way than I hadn't assumed. Do you know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
that, while I don't have something that overlays onto that exactly, I don't know. We talked about this sense of not enoughness being pervasive in society. I think there is this kind of assumption that we get wrong too, as well. Like that there's something about even our relationship, especially with the parents or whoever it might be, that we're assuming something's happening that just a straightforward, honest dialogue can unravel instantly.
Yes. Totally. And the question I ask myself and ask clients is that, and it's always stems from Byron Katie's The Work, is like, is it true? Like, is the thing you're saying is true? Is it? Like, have you actually ever questioned that? And when you start to question it, you can see that, oh, actually, maybe it's not true. And that opens up a whole possibility for a totally different relationship or experience or way of seeing yourself or seeing the world. But we move through life with these totally unexamined assumptions. and they create a whole way of showing up in the world, and they look like they're cemented in place and like it's gospel truth, and I just don't believe that's true.
You know, I think that there's something as well to what you're saying, though. Whatever about all the self-examination one can do, I think the sooner they're just actual conversations with the people in our lives, that's where there's just a total amount of power. And there's very rarely anything that I've brought up with anyone who's been in my life for a long time that it even seems that difficult once the door has been open. I think everyone's almost very, very willing to just find the place where we both can express a truth. And especially with parents, man, I think one of the greatest underdeveloped or underappreciated areas is actually getting to know your parents as adults. I think it has profound implications if you can just ask your parent, how did X, Y, or Z feel? Whether it's your part of the part of their life that you're involved with or not. It's so fascinating to really get to know your parents and ask them intimate questions, you know?
Yeah. Because when you're a kid, it's easy to think that their life started when you were born.
I'm making notes here, Sam. Tell me more. It didn't. Is that what you're about to say?
It didn't. I'm pretty sure it didn't. Yeah, what came up then listening was I always love when I read your writing about that your ability to get a leadership team to have the conversation that hasn't been had, and how that's the work. And there's no framework for that. There's no methodology. It's like, are we feeling brave enough to speak the truth into the room and be able to hold whatever it is that comes out? But I think that goes across all of our relationships. Like I've never ever spoken the truth to someone and regretted it, and it has never not moved our relationship forward, even if the speaking of it was really fucking hard and sometimes their receiving of it was really hard. I don't believe that bringing that into the space is ever going to take away from the relationship.
I think that's gorgeous. Can you give me an example of a moment you perhaps felt like it was going to be really difficult to say it?
I think my wife Holly is just an amazing example of this. She's taught me so much around what it looks like to embody this as a way of being, of just saying the thing. And a lot of our work as a couple has been around her speed to say the thing and my slowness to say the thing. And we've worked that for us, it's better if we slow it down and we meet somewhere in the middle. Because I take a bit longer to process and she's there and it's done and then she's ready to go. But I guess when we spoke about this, it started out where she could tell something was wrong and she would need to invite me to bring me in to say what she's like, essentially say like, what is it that's happening for you? Like what's going on? And I would then say it. And now I'm at the point where I'm able to bring it myself without her needing to invite me in. And it still feels really scary. And it probably always does feel scary to speak the truth in any relationship. But yeah, nothing, I mean, like I said, it's always moved our relationship forward. It always creates connection. It always brings us closer. It always creates something really special off the back of it. Even if the actual act of having the conversation was uncomfortable. It's the same with my clients. I believe my role is to speak the truth and to probably be the only person in their life willing to do that to the level that I'm willing to do it. I believe that's the value that I bring to a coaching relationship, is to be that person. But it never feels great. My experience of it in a session will always be that it will feel like the truth will come through the ground, through my feet, travel up my body, and then it will get to my throat. And I know what like it has language and I'm ready to say it, but then another part of me goes, you can't fucking say that. Like that's either it's rude or it's too direct, or they haven't it's completely unconnected to what they're talking about. Like it doesn't make sense. But if I have that experience, I now know it's what needs to come into the room. And every time I have that experience, I'm now more, I like really consciously am more committed to speaking the truth than I am to being comfortable. So I'll say it, and it always leads to something. Even if it doesn't make sense to what the context of what we're talking about, it will make sense to them. And I think that, speaking of the truth, I think that often it comes from outside of us, and it's actually not ours. It's not ours to withhold because it's coming from some other place.
When that comes up, and it's like so for me, it's both a commitment to saying it, but it's also from having not done it in some moments and knowing the weight and the pain of that. There's kind of nowhere to hide then at some point if you can experience both sides of it, because it's just, either I see something unravel, I live with the echoes of it bouncing around in me, and a form of regret, and also coupled with the sentiment you said there, I haven't actually experienced a moment, particularly personally, in personal relationships, where that has set the relationship back. But as you say, that it's still a moment, because I still don't think we get to escape the human experience of coming to these points of contact, like the sheer intimacy and the being seen of it.
Yeah.
I heard someone say recently that I didn't understand this, but the etymology of the word courage is something to do with speaking or expressing what is on your heart, or showing or sharing it, and I think for good reason as well.
Yeah, that lands.
With just with the initial question that you were saying, like what does it mean to be more me in the world? I'm really intrigued to know, is there anything that you've found out about yourself post this inquiry, with the kind of the not the energy and the willingness that you've brought into this inquiry? What have you kind of discovered about yourself being in the world as you that would have really surprised you, maybe even from that moment of crying in a toilet, knowing that the identity of a professional athlete was gone?
I think one of the biggest discoveries I've had is that I'm a leader. When I was in the rugby team, I was very far from being captain material, and that was never a thing that would ever have been on the cards for me in any of the teams I was in. And I looked at the coaches and the kind of senior leadership team of that rugby team, or all of the rugby teams I was in, and that was the archetype of what a leader is. And so far from who I am as a person that I just kind of, in my head, was like, well, I'm just not one of those kinds of people. And then when I started my business, I ended up with a team of 60, and we were operating across 3 cities. And I somehow managed to build a team that worked and was cohesive and was connected. And I hope that people felt valued, and we had people who were there for a very long time. And I just wasn't, it wasn't something that was ever on my radar. And it's been a really beautiful self-inquiry to ask the question, that what does leadership mean to me, and what does it look like coming through me or from me? And it's something that I feel I get to practice every day as a dad, and I get to practice it with my clients. And I think we can all lead in our own way. And I think it's a gift that we all have to give, is because for me, leadership is helping people do things and become someone that they didn't believe was possible. And like how, yeah, what a gift to be able to share that with people. And it's something I take very seriously, but also quite lightly at the same time. Um, so yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Have you ever had to laugh at yourself in a moment where you were taking it too seriously?
Yes, all the time. um, but particularly at the beginning of that journey was not something I believed I was allowed to do in front of the team. But the more I've, I guess, stepped into it, the more I realized that like being a leader is leading as a human, and being human is admitting your flaws or your mistakes and cleaning up the mess. It's not brushing it under the carpet and hoping that no one noticed. Um, and I think I think it's a really beautiful way for anyone to lead as a human.
Out of interest, what was it in the leadership groups that you saw in past environments that made you think that this wasn't something that was within you?
Predominantly alpha male. Um, we used to do those insights personality tests, and all the leaders would be red and yellow. I was deeply green, and there weren't very many greens and blues in the rugby team. And
Just out of interest, for my own ignorance and anyone who's listening,
yeah,
what's the significance of the green and the blue?
so it's for a long time, but red is very, I'd say, type 1 personality, like very, very sort of alpha, very out there. Yellow is like sort of sunshine, happy-go-lucky, very charismatic, charming kind of people. Green would be deep feeling people, and then blue is more analytically minded. When they used to do our whole team, and then you'd get like, you'd know where everyone was on the chart. And yeah, I don't know if this was what was shared, but it's how I received it, that green was weak.
Right.
And so I very much tried to emulate the people on the yellow and the red side of the spectrum. And that was part of that kind of chameleon like way of being that I touched on earlier. I was like, oh, those are the guys that the coaches really connect with and like. They're the ones that are like the coaches. I need to try and be more like them.
You know, one thing that I really noticed in speaking to you is I get a really clear sense that you are a deeply feeling person, but you're deeply thoughtful in the responses. Like I don't feel like there's some avoidance or bullshit in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, was that when like, was it quite easy to embrace this side of you more then as you started to realize this is more who you are as you're going along this journey?
Yeah, it feels really easy to be me now. I I laugh sometimes that I now get paid to show up as me. I just have to wake up in the morning and have conversations with people and be myself. And the more that I can be me, the more helpful I am to other people. I really believe that. And I really believe that's true for everyone. I think if everyone, the more that we can embody who we are at our core and express that in the world, the more we can spend time doing the things that we love. If everyone was doing that, I think we'd have a pretty balanced world. And I think there would be lots of really beautiful interconnectedness that would happen, and like reciprocity. And yeah, I guess that's what gets me excited, is helping people step more into themselves. And then I think there's a stepping in and then there's a stepping out from that place.
With the significance, just when you mentioned of leadership and the experience of that in the context of being a father, um, very intrigued to know kind of are there any like moments or lessons along the way of that kind of shaped you?
Yeah, so I've got two boys, Freddie and Nelson, who are 6 and 5, from a past relationship, and they're with us half of the week, which is amazing. And Holly and I are due to have a little girl in August, so I'm getting lots of practice. But I don't know if you've experienced this through being a dad, but it's been the most revealing experience of my life, and it's been the most. I love it because I get live feedback all the time about where I'm still attached to something, or stuck in my ways about something, or believing something unhelpful about myself. Like, the boys are just these crystal clear mirrors for me to take a look at myself, and there's no hiding. And I think that for me, being a dad has been, there's, how do I language it? There's this interconnectedness where I'm learning from them, they're learning from me, and it's so fluid. I don't see it as a top-down way of leading, I guess. We really are a team, and like, again, I believe that the more myself I can be, the more an invitation that is for them to be themselves. And that's all I want for them in the world, is for them to be free to express themselves and who they are. And the only way for them to have, well, not the only way, but a way for them to have that as an option, is to see it embodied by their parents. Because it's, they do what we do, they don't do what we say. And yeah, as you can tell, I haven't got a lot of language for it. It's hard to put it into words, but I'm feeling it.
Oh yeah, man. Like, it's I think just that idea you say of it being them kind of being this clear mirror. There's something so, because in other adult relationships you can get the kind of the murkiness sometimes of our own, our own shadows, our own subconscious, our own games or defenses or manipulation showing up. And if you, because my daughter still isn't even 3, so it's even in a particularly like non-strategic sense that she's just doing what she's doing, I think. And to feel anything other, if I'm feeling anything other than love for her, like it's well, I do think that's constant, if you know what I mean. But all the other stuff that comes up on top of that, sometimes I think it's amazing in that sense. Just have it, they don't give you any room to point a finger anywhere else. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm hardly, like, I can hardly point the finger at the 2-year-old at the table as to the justification for anything that I'm doing. But there's something, you mentioned earlier the idea of leading as a human. I think there's something really beautiful about the fact that it creates such an acute awareness that if I am anything other than myself, I'm just going to be creating a lot of disharmony. And one of the most, I think, enjoyable parts of it, and what I did even at the start of it, I assumed that she could actually, we were sharing a thought space. So, trying to create as much kind of transparency as possible. Even if I was just having a thought, I'd be like, yep, Daddy just had that judgment of that person. That, wait till you notice that Daddy's a complex character as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She was only 6 months old, but I don't know, just continuing on that it's not like, let's try and put a brave face on this. Because I think I think all of us are deeply perceptive as to what another human being is experiencing, whether the act is very compelling or not. On some level, we feel it. And I don't know, I think it's not an escaping the human condition, or in air quotes, perfection, that will enhance that. It's actually, just as you put it earlier, as I'm showing up as a human.
Yes. Yeah. And as a human, I think my greatest tool is repairing. because I need it all the time. Yeah, I love what you're saying. Almost like feeling into like the energetic like thought, like sharing that thought space with her, and I think the kids are so perceptive, and they are so connected to us energetically that they do respond really quickly to shifts and changes in us. I remember I had very spent a lot of my life with pretty poor boundaries around being able to say no to people and wanting to please everyone, and that showed up like on steroids and as being a dad, like not wanting to upset the kids by putting a boundary in place and being really able to stand and say something and then stand in it. And again, it's something Holly was amazing. She has amazing boundaries. And she was able to really teach me when she came into mine and the boys' life of what that looked like. She embodied it, which I was like, oh, wow, you can be like that as a parent. And it was something I worked with my coach at the time, and speaking to Holly and looking at the reasons, like this sort of the reasons why I wasn't able to hold a boundary again came from that place of a lack of self-worth and believing that I was allowed to, and believing other people were more important. And it was such a wild experience that the real like the moment it all really came to a head. We were at a music festival and I was lying on the floor with Nelson like above my head, and he was about 3 at the time, and then he spat and it went into my mouth and I lost it. And it was just this like eruption of anger and rage, but all at myself for being someone that won't hold a boundary. Like,
right.
And how that was at this kind of, that was like the proof of this, that my 3-year-old believed he could spit in my face.
Yeah.
And I took this to my coach and like worked on it and spoke about it. And as soon as I did the internal work to believe that I deserved boundaries, and then I started to set them, there was almost an instantaneous shift in how the boys responded to me. And it was just this wild experience of like how so often we can change the outside world by starting on the inside, and it can happen almost instantaneously sometimes.
The instantaneous component, I think, is something that fascinates me. I think, often we have this very long lead up time to what we expect will be the case. And, there's definitely experiences I have in my life when I have realizations around X, Y, or Z, and I don't sense that there's a lag between me embodying it. But I do think some of the things are almost like available to us, just like presence is always available. Whether I meditate or not, someone could feel present in any particular moment at any time. And just someone who might meditate a lot and be present a lot can feel very, they're lacking in it.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, just on the parenting thing, what's becoming apparent for me, which will be open to inquiry, because most of it I do just thoroughly enjoy and have kind of rolled with. But man, I am some defensive lunatic in my mind when I see my child engaging with other kids. I, I have some wild thoughts that I shouldn't be thinking about. 4 and 5-year-olds that I could be considering are doing something wrong in my mind towards my daughter. So I think that will be the next summit for me to climb in that sense. Just curious for you, Sam. I know where you're describing where your life has gone as, and showing up as yourself, and even now the sense that you get to, you get paid to show up as yourself. Are there expressions for this that still feel difficult to step into, or could you describe even that continuous process of kind of, being more you in the world?
So what I'm with at the minute is around my feeling that I have to be the one that carries everything. And that weight of responsibility that I create, which no one else forces me to take on. It's all like I take full ownership for it as my way of being in the world, and how exhausting that can be and how heavy it can be at times. And really at the moment, and I've had some really quite weird experiences where it has felt like life has been showing up to hold me in weird and wonderful ways, and really allowing myself to notice that, again, it's a bit like the story of my parents. Like, I've always been held by life and by family and by partners, but have I allowed myself to stop and look and realize that? And that feels really live for me at the moment. And when I'm coming from a place of, oh no, I'm already held, I'm already safe, there's nothing there's no requirement for me to do anything for those two things to be true, what opens up is so much more like possibility for fun and play and enjoyment. And that has been a real topic for me in the last couple of years of how can I be more childlike and have more fun, and not just in work, but how I am around the boys and how I am with Holly. And that feels like an ongoing inquiry. But again, it's like one that I don't want to get too serious about, because it's kind of the antithesis of what I'm looking at. But to your point around presence is always available, I think the childlike nature that we are is always available to us. Like, I can choose to get through playing Lego, or I can like really get into playing Lego, and I can make a whole universe with Nelson, and my experience will be very different. And I think that's a choice that we have. And I think it's that initial conscious choice to commit to something, and then once you've committed, it kind of will take on a life of its own. It's like with presence, once you start writing or once you start having a conversation, very quickly you don't realize that you're being present, and that's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's but I think the example with kids and play there, well, I think there probably is a typical path a lot of us go on in terms of that. Like, it's so wrapped up in the drudgery and the trauma of everything initially, and because that's some of the more obvious stuff that we ignore, and then we become blatantly aware of, like, oh wow, I'm focusing on a lot of the heavy stuff here, and there's some beautiful invitations to step into more play. And I definitely agree with you about the Lego example. There's, like, if we can accept that invitation from a child, they're really offering us into something that, otherwise you might pay someone to do on a retreat for you. Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was sat down on the ground with my daughter, like painting and making things out of plasticine. And, if you commit to that, or if you're present to it, like, it really would be some of the stuff that people might do to kind of lure you out of some of the adult, in air quote, tensions of life and everything else. Sam, just, considering where the conversation started, just around how do I step more into being myself in the world, talking about different chapters in your life, of noticing where there was a gap between that, noticing how even some things followed you from chapter to chapter, and the ideas of who you thought you should be, and clearly the power of that engagement with that coach, of someone who reached out to you several times, the acknowledgement of just how things can change so considerably, in terms of just having meaningful contact and dialogues with people, teachers in your life, even by the sounds of it with your wife and your children, and the significance of, going back and having meaningful conversations with parents, that we can just almost completely rewrite stories that we've been holding very closely. And what I think is totally apparent from just engaging with you, man, is just the significance of showing up as a human, and that being a way of being in the world. I'm really intrigued to ask you the question, Sam, of what is a good life for you?
For me, it's all of it. It's like, it's been really lovely to just walk back through parts of my life today with you, and like, it's all great. Even the hard times are great. They might not be in the moment, but looking back, I'm glad it all happened. really, really believe that I wouldn't change a single thing. I wouldn't take out the chapter where I was using drugs and alcohol in a really destructive way, where I locked myself out of friends and family relationships, and it's all necessary. And when I remember that, it's like, well, whatever's going to come my way, because there's going to be plenty of hard times on their way that they're already incoming. Like, it will be true for those too. And yeah, life. I always talk about how being human is a full spectrum experience, and I think so many people try and live in that median zone in the middle. They don't allow themselves to get too excited about life because they're too worried about it all coming crashing down. So they just exist in this kind of grey middle area. And like, I really want all of it. I want to feel grief and loss and pain and ecstasy and joy and love. And that's what we're born to do. And there are plenty of times when I forget everything that I've just said and I hate it all. And that's also part of the experience too.
Yeah, Sam, I've absolutely nothing else to add to that, but just to say thank you so much for joining us on the What is a Good Life podcast today. I've really just enjoyed your company, man.
Likewise, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, Mark, and thank you for having me on.